Hello and welcome to UnHerd. I'm Freddie Sayers. If you want to talk to someone who really knows the ins and outs of big media, someone who's seen the powerful up close for decades and reported and written about them, you would struggle to do better than Michael Wolff. His trilogy of books about former President Donald Trump, Fire and Fury, Siege, and Landslide have been global bestsellers, and he has now taken on Rupert Murdoch for the final installation coming out this week called The Fall. He joins us from New York. It's great to have you on the show, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
So I've been reading your books and revisiting them in recent days, and I've just been struck by this powerful sense that the world you are such the expert on, the world of media politics that you have been covering for decades, is changing fast. It used to be somehow that you knew where the power lies. It was the big networks, it was the party establishment, the stars, the newspaper. And now somehow it's harder to tell where the power is.
That's what has made this so interesting for me. You never know whether the sands you're standing on will dissolve or not. Virtually everyone in this business has been challenged in some profound way, and often they've been disappeared. They were there, they were important, and then gone. And one of the interesting things about Murdoch, of course, is that he has been there so long in such a fixture. For 70 years, I think you could reasonably say he has held more power and more influence far longer than anyone else in our time. But even now, even Rupert Murdoch, I think, is the sands are not only shifting but dissolving under him.
Yeah, well, decidedly so. It was this past week that he has finally announced his retirement at the grand old age of 92.
And that is, and it is partly because of the grand old age of 92. The end comes inevitably. But there are also other factors. It's not just that he's aged out of the game. The game's changed, and the game is changing in so many ways against him.
That's the image that emerges from this. You think of him as this behind-the-scenes power on top of everything, sort of puppet master. But the effect that comes out of your book is kind of someone overtaken by events, or you talk about him mumbling a lot, getting calls wrong, things not really working out how he wanted to, being bullied by his children. It's actually a rather forlorn figure.
In many ways, he is, I guess you would say, reaping what he sowed, and it's not pleasant for him. And principally, Fox News, Donald Trump became the president of the United States largely because of Fox News. And that is confounding to Murdoch and wounding that he might have made Donald Trump, a man he detests, has only ever had contempt for, that he might have made him president. And then this kind of ultimate reality that might be his legacy, that Fox News and Rupert Murdoch are his legacy. It's a sort of might be reached toward tragic irony here. Fox News is the part of his business that he's probably had the least to do with. He started it in 1996 because he was rebuffed in his efforts to buy CNN. So it was like, okay, I'll start my own news network. But he's never been that interested in television, never watches television, is certainly not a programmer, is certainly not a television executive. And he hired this man, Roger Ailes, to start Fox News and to grow it. And Roger sat on the top of it for more than 20 years. And it was his network. It wasn't Rupert's network. Rupert was happy to collect the money, and incredible amounts of money it was.
It's one of the areas where it's different from Succession, the hit TV show, because there the Brian Cox character is on the floor of the newsroom. He loves TV. He's obsessed with cable. What you're saying is that Rupert Murdoch doesn't really love cable. And in a way, it's a kind of disappointing revelation, because the world was simpler and made more sense when Rupert Murdoch was stoking the fires of Fox News and really felt committed to its ideological causes. The picture you paint is really confusing, because in fact, he's kind of embarrassed of it. in some way.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, I mean, he's always embarrassed by. Rupert Murdoch, and this is, speaking of a kind of curious throwback, is a newspaper man. It's the only thing he really, really is passionate about. That and his family, the family dynasty he imagined. Newspapers have been his life. They made him. When you see Rupert with a newspaper, it's like this physical love affair. The way he handles it, the way he folds it, the way he marks it, it's nearly erotic. And television and movies and these other parts of his empire, which have made him enormous amount of money because he's a very astute media guy, a business guy. He can see the audience, he can see where the money is flowing, but that's not it's not him. It's not his love doesn't flow.
It's striking how the newspapers are pretty absent from your account. It's as you say, you don't seem to think that that's where the interest is. I mean, let me try and make a defense of them, at least pointing to the biggest newspaper in the world, which is the New York Times. Its subscription numbers are hugely up. You could make a case, I think, that the New York Times is more influential politically and culturally than any individual TV channel or media.
But Rupert Murdoch doesn't own the New York Times.
That's true.
Not for lack of longing to own the New York Times. He does own the Wall Street Journal, which remains profitable and influential. That's true. But the bulk of his newspaper holdings, empire and holdings in the UK and Australia are no longer profitable. And they are declining assets, and they are declining in importance.
So Fox News then, clearly still highly influential, but even that, by your account, is kind of wobbly. It feels like now with the departure of Tucker Carlson and the moves that have been there recently, maybe even its grip is failing.
Yeah, no, and I you have to see this against the fuller media background. It's cable television. Cable television is a declining business. It's challenged on all fronts. Cable television, which was the great cash cow for 20 years, 25 years of the media business, just hit a wall, and not that long ago, but it's a wall that it won't get over. And it too, not as fast as newspapers and not as advanced as newspapers, but as inevitable as newspapers, is a declining business. One of Murdoch's daughters has been arguing they should sell this because Fox News is not going to become more valuable. It's only going to become less valuable.
So in your view, where's the power going then? If it's flowed out of newspapers, flowing out of cable TV, where are the narratives going to be set? Where is the power?
Well, I think that those are probably two different questions: where the power is and where the narratives are being set. I think in one case, clearly it's being said in the technology business, but one of the problems with the technology business is that it has no real narratives. It's not a narrative business. And if you make that mistake, you probably fail in the business. It's a business about functionality. But having said that, Rupert Murdoch has been interested in narrative. He is not only interested in narrative, he has orchestrated much of the narrative of the last several generations. What happens to the media business? What happens to the business of telling stories? Of creating the reflection of the time we live in. I don't know.
Let me ask about Tucker Carlson a little bit, because we touched there on Fox News. Tucker left. There was a lot of excitement that he had set up on Twitter. And this, in a way, was going to be a kind of test case of these changing media times. If it worked out on Twitter, it's proof that the old saying, nobody is bigger than the network, is no longer true, and he was going to be bigger than the network. Do you think it's going to work out for him on Twitter?
I mean, I think Tucker is in the nascent days of trying to figure this out. He may figure it out. He may not figure it out. Others are in fact figuring out. I mean, Joe Rogan or Ben Shapiro. I mean, these are interesting and incredibly profitable initiatives. And I think on the broader the broader look at this is that Fox has had this incredible monopoly for a long time over the conservative audience, and there really is no reason to believe that won't go the same way as the mainstream liberal audience into all various levels of fragmentation. I mean, it's a very profitable audience, and people are going to be out there with new technologies trying to grab it. Whether that will be Tucker or not, I don't know. What we're seeing, and maybe the question is Donald Trump bigger than the network, bigger than Fox News, which he is at war with. They have been at war with him. He is now in full war with them.
Mm. Well, I mean, you've posed the question, and that brings us nicely on to Donald Trump, which is someone I'm obviously keen to talk about. What do you think? What's your answer to your own question? Is he bigger than the network? Do you think he will succeed in coming back?
So let's look at what's happened so far. I mean, Rupert Murdoch, feeling guilty or trying to burnish his legacy, decided that he would step forward and try to oppose or undermine Donald Trump, and he invented the candidacy of Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis is a Fox bubble, and that has obviously failed terribly. And the only effect of it has been that Donald Trump is probably a more popular primary candidate than any in modern history. Despite all else, despite 4 indictments, despite yesterday New York State having taken away his business, he is headed for, almost inevitably headed for, the Republican nomination. He may well be president again. This, in spite of Fox News and Rupert Murdoch.
I mean, do you have a view on that? So, presumably, you think he will be the nominee? If it comes down to Biden and Trump, if you were a betting man, and I know journalists don't like to make confident predictions, but if you were a betting man, where would your money be if that's the race?
If there are two people running, they each have a 50% chance of winning. You can argue the logic that Donald Trump should not win. I mean, he's always been a minority figure. His campaigns are run in the most chaotic and disorganized fashion. In 2020, weeks before the election, he's in the hole. His campaign is in the hole, $200 million. This has never happened. So he should not win, except for the fact that in very close races, and this will certainly be a very close race again, what usually throws it one way or the other are exogenous factors. You can't tell. Does Joe Biden fall over a couple of times? We wait and see. But the thing is, and the important thing to remember, is that he certainly could become the president again.
And your story with him is the most unusual one, and kind of illuminates some of the strangeness and maybe some of the genius of Donald Trump, in that you would imagine that you are a hostile reporter of the Trump phenomenon. You're not thought of as a diehard Republican, to put it mildly, and yet he invited you into his circle. He gave you exclusive interviews, and even after you had written in a not very flattering way about him, he carried on getting back in touch. Is he still in touch?
In somewhere along the line, he threatened to sue me and tried to stop the publication of my book. So go figure. Yes, we're still in touch. I mean, it's all of these kinds of words are strange words to apply to Donald Trump, because they're not like I'm in touch with a variety of people, and I'm in touch with Donald Trump in a somewhat more in a different, more peculiar way. Are we really in touch? He might call me up, but is it really me he's speaking up? No, he doesn't text, but there have been phone calls, and
I mean, that's kind
but then you stop to say,
pause on that. It is it is quite remarkable that you've written this trilogy of books that I would say really paints in vivid color the chaos of the Trump administration, and yet he's still calling you up. He might even give you another exclusive. Maybe there'll be a fourth volume to come. Who knows? I mean, why is he doing that?
I think that he's sort of come to see these books as a kind of positive chronicle, if only because they've sold so many copies. Therefore, they must be it must be good. There's one of the Trump people said to me not too long ago. They said the only metric we pay attention to is how much attention he's getting. Good, bad, doesn't make any difference. Whatever the attention is, the poll numbers go up. So that's what we pay attention to. So I guess I'm part of that attention matrix.
For some people, I think this will be almost disappointing to hear, because what we've now done is we've gone through two of these great big, outsized, considered very right-wing characters, Rupert Murdoch and now Donald Trump. And in each case, you're telling us that there are parts of them that are still just wanting to be liked by the mainstream. They're actually in kind of phonies in some way. They're conservative sort of bona fides, their conservative credentials are maybe not all that.
I think that is probably true. I mean, in a way, it's more surprising about Rupert Murdoch than Donald Trump, who has grown up in New York and in the kind of the bosom of the establishment, even if much of that time was as a buffoon to the establishment. Nevertheless, I mean, Rupert Murdoch, though, has been, for most of his careers, I am the outsider. I am the challenge to the insiders. But clearly, somewhere along the way, and I'm not sure Rupert himself exactly appreciates this, he became the establishment. He's Rupert Murdoch. He became the most powerful force in the entertainment business, the most powerful, certainly one of the most powerful forces in politics in 3 countries. And certainly a mainstay of the business community.
And Donald Trump, mysteriously, despite having literally been president, is still considered anti-establishment. He's outside the citadel. Do you think that's because of the prosecutions and all of the stuff thrown at him? Do you think that's what's kept him? And that had he been more accepted, he would have his light would have burnt out?
I mean, I think one of Donald Trump's pieces of genius, although, I'm not sure that he could articulate this, and I'm not sure that he actually has planned it or strategized it this way, is that his stature as Donald Trump has increased on the basis of conflict, which is, if you spend 14 years as a reality television star, I think you understand. You got to have conflict. You got to have it. You got to have conflict at every turn, and it doesn't matter if it's real conflict or not. It's just you have to find an enemy. And curiously now, Trump has now made Fox his enemy. It doesn't matter who the enemy is. You just make it your enemy. And the establishment, so-called, is a very convenient way for Donald Trump to keep being Donald Trump, to keep challenging the establishment.
It sounds kind of exhausting if he is successful and if he is reelected. It's just going to be conflict for another 4 years. Are you one of these people who has grave fears for the future of the country if that should happen, or do you think it'll be noisy and we'll survive?
I am not one of those people who has grave fears. I mean, I have fears. I mean, it's never an easy road, but I think that democracy perseveres, America perseveres, and at some point Donald Trump becomes a memory. At some point, though, not far from yet.
Final question for you. Let me turn the focus onto the current president, Joe Biden. Because at times, the character in this Murdoch book, slightly too old for the job, slightly overwhelmed by the complexity of the modern world, reminded me of Joe Biden. I wonder if you think there's something in that really these characters, and you could kind of throw Donald Trump in that group as well, although he's certainly more energetic. America has an old man problem where there are too many of these octogenarians or almost octogenarians in charge, and they all need sweeping away.
I suspect Joe Biden is better in private than he is in public. In public, he looks terrible. He looks like an old man. He walks like an old man. He talks like an old man. I've been covering politics for a long time. So, Joe Biden, even as a young man, kind of seemed like an old man certainly in the way he spoke and in the way in public he tried to complete a sentence. So I don't know. So and I think under the circumstances, Joe Biden has actually done a pretty good job. He's worked it in a way that I don't think anyone imagined it could quite be worked at this point in time. And I think that's what Joe Biden feels. I've done a good job. So, screw it that I'm 80 and that I might fall over at any given moment. I'm gonna do it.
How much do you think liberals are to blame for so much of this political division, for the rise of Trump, for the political mess that the US seems to find itself in? It's very easy to say there are these right-wing characters who came and got a lot of popularity. Do you think the liberal establishment is responsible?
Well, I think clearly the liberal establishment has not been up to being a competitor to the rise of the conservative outliers. I think that they've kind of the liberal establishment has gathered its skirts and been unable to respond in any kind of an effective manner. I don't think they have a clear voice. I don't think that they have a clear mission. I think that they are caught in their own sense of self-satisfaction and self-righteousness, and that has prevented them from being smart, and funny, and being able to go toe to toe.
Michael Wolff, thank you for your time today.
Anytime.
That was Michael Wolff, perhaps the preeminent observer and commentator on the American media political scene. He's been there for decades. He was given more access than anyone else to the Donald Trump White House. Trump just calling him up, as he told us there, asking for more interviews. And as for Rupert Murdoch, he once again has had more conversations with Michael Wolff than any other journalist. And yet, the figures that he talks about, that whole world of big, grand men sitting there on top of these huge media corporations, newspapers, newspaper man, as he describes Rupert Murdoch, even Fox News, which we think of as this ultra-powerful engine of the American right, according to Michael Wolff, is already ebbing away. It's losing energy. So the question has to be, where is the power going? Well, you'll be unsurprised to hear we have our own answer to that question here at UnHerd. It is channels like this and to audiences like you. So on that note, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.